I mean, I didn't have to think twice about doing it. I knew I could do it and that it would change my life doing it. And it kind of...
Everyone thought Jessica Lange and Sam Shepard had the kind of love that lasts forever, but the truth is way darker. She stood by him through everything: addiction, distance, emotional chaos. She tried to save him, again and again, but here's the part no one talks about: sometimes love isn't enough. And in their story, it changed everything. What really happened between Jessica Lange and Sam Shepard? From the outside, it looked like the kind of love people dream about: intense, passionate, almost unbreakable. They met in the early 1980s, and from the very beginning, there was nothing casual about it. It wasn't slow or careful. It was immediate, overwhelming, and consuming. Jessica once described how they couldn't even do simple things apart, like going to the grocery store. That's how deep it was. That's how real it felt. But intense love doesn't always mean stable love, and with Sam, stability was never guaranteed. While Jessica was grounded, focused, and emotionally present, Sam was restless, constantly searching for something he couldn't quite define. At first, that mystery made him even more attractive, more magnetic, but over time, it became distance. And that distance slowly started to hurt. As their relationship grew, so did the challenges. Sam's struggles with alcohol became more serious, and it wasn't just occasional drinking, it was heavy, destructive, and unpredictable. Jessica saw it happening in real time. She felt the changes, the tension, the emotional gaps that kept getting wider. She tried to hold everything together, to protect what they had, to bring him back from the edge again and again. But addiction isn't something love alone can fix. No matter how deeply you care about someone, you can't fight their battles for them. And that's where things started to fall apart, not suddenly, but slowly, piece by piece. There were nights when Sam would disappear, days when Jessica didn't know where he was, moments when she felt completely alone even while being in a relationship. Imagine loving someone with everything you have, yet never feeling secure with them. That was her reality, and still, she stayed. The truth is, what they shared wasn't easy to walk away from. It was bigger than logic, bigger than reason. It was history. They built a life together, had children, and experienced moments that tied them together in ways most people never understand. At one point, Jessica even said she couldn't imagine a future without him. That's how strong their bond was. But even the strongest bonds can start to crack, and in their case, those cracks kept growing. Love can survive a lot: distance, mistakes, even pain, but what it struggles to survive is emotional absence. And that's exactly what started happening. Sam wasn't always present, even when he was physically there. Jessica could feel that growing silence, that emotional gap that no conversation could fix. And the hardest part was that she kept trying, over and over again, to rebuild what they once had, but every time she got close, it felt like Sam pulled away again, as if something inside him wouldn't let him stay. This wasn't about a lack of love. They loved each other deeply. That was never the problem. The problem was that they needed different things. Jessica wanted stability, closeness, a shared life built on presence and consistency. Sam, on the other hand, craved freedom, space, and escape. Those two worlds don't always align, no matter how strong the connection is. Over time, the relationship became emotionally exhausting, not because they didn't care, but because caring wasn't enough anymore. Sometimes, you can give someone your whole heart and still lose them. Jessica began to realize that slowly and painfully. She had spent years being the strong one, the patient one, the one who stayed no matter what. But even strength has limits, and even love has a breaking point. Eventually, she found herself at the edge of something she could no longer fix. And maybe deep down, she knew it was never hers to fix in the first place. Sam's battles, his addiction, his restlessness, his need to run, were his own. No amount of love could change that. That realization is one of the hardest truths anyone can face. It forces you to see things clearly, even when you don't want to, even when it hurts. So the question became, how long do you stay when staying is slowly breaking you? For Jessica, the answer didn't come all at once. It came in quiet moments, in long silences, in the growing distance between them, until one day, it became undeniable. This wasn't the same love anymore, and maybe it never could be again. After nearly 3 decades together, they made the hardest decision of all: they let go. Not because they stopped loving each other, but because holding on had become more painful than letting go. And endings like that aren't loud or dramatic. They're quiet, heavy, and final. But what makes their story even more powerful is that even after it ended, the connection never truly disappeared. Some people don't just leave your life, they stay with you in memories, in emotions, in the person you've become because of them. For Jessica, Sam was that person. He remained the greatest love of her life, despite everything they went through. And maybe that's the most complicated truth of all: you can love someone completely and still know they weren't right for you. In the end, as time passed, Sam's life took a more difficult turn. His health began to decline, slowly at first, then more rapidly. Eventually, he was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and suddenly, everything changed again. The same man who had spent years running from things now found himself facing something he couldn't escape. Those final years were filled with physical struggle and emotional weight. His independence faded, his strength weakened, and the reality of his condition became impossible to ignore. There were moments of anger, moments of sadness, and moments of quiet reflection. It was a difficult ending for a man who had lived so freely, so unpredictably, for most of his life. Even though they had gone their separate ways, the history between them remained. You don't spend decades with someone and simply erase that connection. Jessica had long accepted the reality of who Sam was, both the brilliance and the brokenness. She had loved him through all of it, and that love didn't just disappear. It transformed. It became something quieter, something more reflective. When Sam passed away in 2017, it marked the end of a chapter that had shaped a significant part of her life. But it also left behind a story, one that continues to resonate with people because it feels real, raw, and deeply human. In the years since, Jessica has spoken about life with a sense of clarity and independence. She has emphasized that her identity was never defined by the men she was with, that her success and her strength always came from within. That perspective didn't come easily. It was shaped by years of experience, love, loss, and self-discovery. She has also opened up about her own struggles, including periods of depression that she learned to navigate in her own way. Rather than relying on others to fix her pain, she faced it, lived through it, and allowed it to become part of her creative depth. Today, her life is centered more around family, especially her children and grandchildren, who have brought her a different kind of joy, one that feels lighter, more stable, and deeply fulfilling. It's a different chapter, one that contrasts sharply with the intensity of her years with Sam. But that contrast is what makes her story so powerful. It shows growth. It shows resilience. And most importantly, it shows that even after experiencing a love that was both beautiful and painful, it's still possible to move forward and find peace. But even after everything, their story doesn't really end there. Because when you look closely at Jessica Lange and Sam Shepard, you begin to realize that what they shared was never just a relationship, it was something far more complex. It was two completely different worlds trying to exist in the same space. Jessica was grounded, emotionally present, and deeply connected to her work and family, while Sam often felt like he was drifting between realities, pulled by something even he couldn't fully understand. And maybe that's exactly what made their connection feel so powerful in the beginning. She gave him stability, something solid to hold on to, while he brought intensity into her life, a kind of passion that felt rare and electric. For a time, that balance worked. It made them feel complete. But the truth is, that kind of balance is fragile, because eventually one side starts carrying more weight than the other, and when that happens, even the strongest connection can begin to break. What makes their story so real, and honestly so relatable, is that there was no single moment where everything collapsed. It wasn't one big fight or one final decision that ended it all. Instead, it was a slow unraveling, the kind that happens quietly over time. The kind you don't even notice at first, until one day you wake up and realize things don't feel the same anymore. The conversations aren't as deep, the presence isn't as strong, and the connection that once felt unbreakable now feels distant. That's the kind of ending they had. Quiet, heavy, and filled with things left unsaid. And maybe that's what makes it so painful, because the love didn't just disappear. It stayed there, lingering in the background, even as the relationship itself faded away. Even after they went their separate ways, the impact they had on each other never really faded. You don't spend decades building a life with someone and just move on like nothing happened. That kind of connection stays with you. It becomes part of who you are. Sam continued to speak about Jessica with deep respect, often admiring her honesty, her strength, and the way she carried herself. And Jessica, in her own way, never denied what Sam meant to her either. She didn't try to erase him or rewrite their story into something easier to explain. Instead, she accepted it for what it was: beautiful, complicated, and at times, incredibly painful. That kind of honesty is rare, and it says a lot about the depth of what they shared. As life moved forward, Jessica began to shift her focus in a way that felt more grounded and fulfilling. At the same time, she began to understand something about herself that had been slowly forming over the years. Her identity was never meant to be tied to anyone else, not even to a love as powerful as the one she had shared with Sam. She had built her career on her own, earned her success through her own work, and carried her struggles in her own way. That realization didn't come easily, but once it did, it changed how she saw everything. She was no longer trying to fix something that was never hers to fix. She was no longer trying to hold together a life that kept slipping through her fingers. Instead, she was choosing herself, and in doing that, she was finally finding a sense of peace. But that doesn't mean she forgot him. People often assume that moving on means letting go completely, but that's not how it works with a love like theirs. Some connections don't disappear. They stay with you, quietly shaping how you see the world, how you understand love, and how you understand yourself. Sam was still a part of her story, not as something unresolved, but as something that had already done its work. He had been the intensity, the chaos, the passion that pushed her to her limits and, in many ways, helped her discover her own strength. Meanwhile, Sam's path continued in a way that reflected who he had always been. Even as time went on, there was still a sense of restlessness about him, as if he was always searching for something just out of reach. His creativity remained, his brilliance undeniable, but so did the struggles that had followed him for most of his life. And when his health began to decline, that reality became impossible to ignore. The man who once moved through life on his own terms was now facing something he couldn't control. Those final years were not easy. Physically, he was weakening. Emotionally, he was carrying the weight of everything he had been through. There were moments of reflection, moments where the past seemed to come back all at once. His choices, his relationships, the things he had gained, and the things he had lost. And in those moments, you can't help but wonder what he thought about the life he had lived. The love he had experienced. The people he had left behind when he passed away in 2017, it marked more than just the end of his life. It marked the end of a chapter that had been deeply intertwined with Jessica's for decades. And yet, even then, the story didn't feel like it was truly over. Because what they had shared didn't disappear with time, and it didn't disappear with his passing. It remained, not as something painful, but as something meaningful. Something that had shaped them both in ways that would always be a part of who they were. And maybe that's what makes their story so powerful. It's not about a perfect ending. It's not about a love that lasts forever in the way we imagine. It's about something more real than that. It's about understanding that love can be both beautiful and difficult at the same time. That it can build you up, and break you down. That it can change your life, even if it doesn't stay in it, because sometimes, the person who means the most to you, is also the one you can't build a future with, and that doesn't make the love any less real. If anything, it makes it more because it forces you to grow. To see things clearly. To understand yourself in a way you never had before, and that's exactly what happened here. Jessica Lange didn't walk away empty. She walked away changed. Stronger. More aware of what she needed, what she deserved, and what she was no longer willing to lose herself in. And Sam Shepard, in his own way, remained a part of that journey, not as someone she held onto, but as someone who had already left a lasting mark. So when people look at their story and ask what went wrong, they might be asking the wrong question. Maybe it was never about something going wrong. Maybe it was about two people who found each other at a certain point in their lives, shared something incredibly powerful, and then had to let it go when it could no longer hold them both in the same way. And that leads to a question that stays with you long after their story ends. What if the purpose of some relationships isn't to last forever, but to change you forever? because in the end, that's exactly what this was, not just a love story, but a turning point.